Hey, what's up guys? It's Luke, Black Sheep 217 on Pokemon, the official trading card game site online, and at Zoom Battle Gym on Facebook. That's where you can interact with me and also participate in Zoom Pokemon tournaments. Right now we're playing theme decks against each other. I give out some small prizes to the winners, but it's just a fun time where you can hang out with us and people who like Pokemon the game and want to play online, especially now during these like crazy times when we can't go anywhere. Might as well be at home playing some Pokemon and having fun that way. So join if you want to. We'd love to have you there. Okay, today I'm going to be talking about one of the most popular decks that I see when I play theme decks, and that's the Charizard theme deck. Charizard is one of the most iconic and most popular Pokemon ever. I mean, I remember when the first base set came out, everyone was crazy for Charizard. That's the one holo foil card that if you got it, you were like the top dog. You were it if you had that card, because that card was amazing and it was worth a lot, and now it's worth thousands and thousands of dollars. It's crazy. Well, it's no surprise that the Charizard theme deck from Vivid Voltage is a very popular theme deck, but is it any good? Just because it has the Charizard name on it doesn't mean it's necessarily good. But long story short, it is actually a very good deck, a very strong deck, and I'm going to talk about that deck today. So whenever I do these reviews, I always break it up into the Pokemon that are in the deck. I also talk about the trainers, I talk about things that I wish the deck had, its strengths, and then of course its weaknesses, and then I give an overall grade at the very end of the video. So if you want to check out any of those specific chapters, you can check out down below. I've sort of set some chapter markers, so check that out if you want to skip over to any particular section. The first section though that I'm going to talk about are the Pokemon that are actually in this deck, and I break it up into different categories. My first category, of course, are the good Pokemon. I mean, you're going to have the best Pokemon, and these are the Pokemon that I would say are your winners. The ones you want out active or on your bench. They're the Pokemon that you're going to be utilizing to help you win the game. You're also going to have decent Pokemon. Now, these are Pokemon that are pretty good Pokemon, but they're not necessarily the best Pokemon in the deck, so I just call them decent. They're not bad to have, but they're okay. Below that are the very situational Pokemon, and a situational Pokemon is one that you don't really want to have out unless it's a very, very specific circumstance. So, that's why they're situational, because you only want them at very certain times. Otherwise, you probably don't want them in your hand, on your bench, anywhere. And the last category of Pokemon, unfortunately, I call them the lame Pokemon. These Pokemon are the ones that you never want to have. You're like, why are these Pokemon even in this deck? So those are the different categories, and this particular theme deck has both very good Pokemon and a few lame ones. So we're going to talk about them right now. Okay, we're here at the Pokemon screen on Pokemon, the trading card game online. We're going to look at the entire deck, we're going to look at each Pokemon, and we're going to go through, if they're good Pokemon, bad Pokemon, middle Pokemon, all of the stuff we just talked about. We're going to start here with Charmander, and actually, Charmander is one of, I would say, the good Pokemon. He's a basic Pokemon, but check out what he can do. For 1 fire energy, he can draw a card. That's not bad. If he's out there at first and you don't really have much and you're trying to build up that hand, which is what this deck is trying to do, his collectability with just 1 fire energy can net you a card at the end of the turn. Who knows? You might draw a card that draws you more cards. Always, the more cards you can get early on, the better, because that card advantage is going to help you a lot. And for 2 fire energy, he can do Flare for 30 damage. That's not bad for 2 energy. So 30 damage is a decently powerful attack, and with this deck, you're bound to have fire energy, of course. So having 2 damaging your opponent for 30 in very early turns can be very powerful. And his 70 HP. You know, a lot of basic Pokemon, they can range all the way from like way down in the 30 HP range to 40 to 50 and 60 are kind of like your typical basic Pokemon, but Charmander here is 70 HP. So he's a little bit tougher than your typical basic Pokemon. Okay, so next up we have Charmeleon. Now, Charmeleon is also in my good Pokemon category. We're just gonna go through the good ones first and then we'll go down the list, okay? So Charmeleon, he is 90 HP, so he only gains 20 HP from Charmander, so that's not super great. But check out his attack. He's got a slash that only costs 1 fire energy. It takes out 20. So if you have an early Charmeleon, you can evolve Charmander, put the slash on, and start just slashing away, slash, 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 for 20. That's not bad. But look at his other attack, Raging Flames. Deals 60 damage for only 2 energy. That's a really cost-effective attack. 60 damage is going to take out a lot of those basic Pokemon I just talked about with Charmander. So with Charmander, you know, he's a little bit stronger than your basic Pokemon. Well, Charmeleon has an attack that can defeat like 75% of basic Pokemon. So he's very, very strong. You do have to discard the top 3 cards of your deck. That's not the best thing to do, but you know what? I would probably do it just because I want to deal more damage at the beginning, possibly getting some knockouts, softening up the opponent. So Raging Flame is definitely worth it. Maybe once, maybe twice. You know, I don't know how much more I would do Raging Flame unless I knew it would win me the game sooner than later. But it is a very good attack and one that I highly recommend using to really punch that opponent early on. Okay, well, this guy has to be in the good category. If there was a higher category than good, then he would be in this too. It's Charizard. Charizard is beastly. With 170 HP, he is so strong. That is a very tough Pokemon. He's not going to get knocked out in one hit by most Pokemon. Like 90% of Pokemon cannot take him out. There are a few exceptions that could one hit Charizard, but for the most part, Charizard is going to stay there for at least a few turns if you have him out. Let's take a look at his ability of Battle Sense. It says that you can look at the top 3 cards of your deck, put one of them in your hand, and discard the other cards. That's an amazing drawing mechanic. It's not even one that ends your turn, it's just you can do it anytime during your turn. Take the 3 cards. Oh, I like this one. And you get it, boom, in your hand. So, yes, there are some disadvantages. You do have to discard 2 cards to use Battle Sense, but you know what? Getting the exact cards you need and getting through your deck like that, it's a major, major win. That is a really, really good ability. Now, his Royal Blaze, for 2 fire energy, he's taking off 100 base damage. Yikes! That is very, very strong. But you know what? You're going to want Charizard to really one-hit knock out your opponent. So you're going to want to add the damage, and that's if you have Leon cards in your discard pile, Charizard will increase the damage. So you're definitely going to want to use Leon in this deck. And of course, in the theme deck, there are 2 Leon cards. So look out for those to help increase this Royal Blaze attack. Our next Pokemon is a little guy. It's Yanma. Yanma looks like a pushover. It looks like it's a little bug. He's nothing. But he's actually surprisingly potent. Check out his base HP of 80. 80 for a little thing like that? I wouldn't have even thought. But that's a pretty healthy basic Pokemon. He's also got an attack that you can poke at people for 10 called U-Turn. Now, the 10 damage is nothing really spectacular. But what I really like about Yanma is that you can switch him out for a bench Pokemon. So you can actually poke some damage and get him out of the active spot. Maybe put Charizard in or put someone else in and get Yanma out of there. Now, you don't have to get him out of there if you don't want to, but that option to switch out can be super annoying to like your opponent. So that is a really good ability. And if you really want Yanma out there, his Cutting Wind for 3 energy takes out 60 damage. That's a pretty strong attack too. I mean, that's pretty good. I'm a little bit hesitant to put 3 energy on Yanma unless I'm really wanting to evolve him. But you know what? If you can get 3 energy onto him and you're dealing 60 early on, he's gonna really soften up your opponent and possibly even win you the game that early. So Yanma is a very, very good Pokemon. I like Yanma a lot, but you know what? Yan Mega is way better than Yanma. So Yan Mega is like Yanma on super steroids. I mean, this guy, well, his picture already, you can see like his picture is, he's so much beastlier than he was in the other. He's not friendly anymore. He's like super mean and he's gonna get you. So he also has U-turn, but you know what? U-turn this time, instead of poking for 10, not even 20, 30, or 40, it takes out 50 damage. 50 damage for 2 energy, and you have the option to switch him out. That is crazy good. And you know, there are some Pokemon that are like weak to grass, which he is, and if they have like 100 HP, boom, he just takes them out like that. He's an unbelievable Pokemon. Really, really good. Now again, he has a secondary attack, Cutting Wind, for 130. That's a lot of damage that can take out 130, but it does cost you 4 colorless. That is a lot of energy commitment on one card like this. The good thing is he does at least have 130 HP, and you know what? Depending on your game situation, that might be something that you go for. If you're trying to really get some knockout punches with the Cutting Wind, go for it. But you know what? The real killer move is his U-turn and this other effect. Did you guys take a look at his retreat cost? Zippo. It costs nothing to retreat Yan Mega. What? So you could, if he's in the active spot, he can just leave and have someone else come in. You don't need to use a switch. You don't have to use any energy wasted because you're throwing it away due to retreat cost. He's a free retreat. That is an amazing option, because if you have other people on the bench that you want out there and you don't have any way of getting your Pokemon out like a switch, well, it doesn't matter with Yan Mega because he is free to retreat. And I mean, that's like borderline overkill there. He's like almost overpowered for a Pokemon like this. He's that good. Lugia. Lugia is a very powerful Pokemon, and he's just randomly thrown in this deck. They just threw him in there. Just give you another great Pokemon to play with. He's got a 1 energy gust that deals 30. That's strong. And his energy loop goes for 120, and 1 energy goes back into your hand, which you can just plop back down on the next turn, or if he dies, then you can put that energy on someone else. That's really strong. Why is he even in this deck? Well, I think he's there because you do need a strong Pokemon sometimes, and if you happen to get him, you know, this deck can be particularly weak to water decks. So Lugia is there to kind of like hold the fort down. I think Lugia is good at any time in the game. He has enough HP to kind of withstand a few hits, and in the early game, he's going to stay in that active spot, being a real beast against your opponent. The only thing that might weaken him, of course, he's weak against electricity, so that's the one thing you do have to watch out for. But other than that, this guy can be a mainstay for you in your Pokemon. He's a solid Pokemon. He just makes this deck even better. Whew, that was a lot of good Pokemon. I would consider all the Pokemon I just listed in the good Pokemon category. These are solid Pokemon that I would be very happy drawing, just having in my hand, ready to play. So, we're going to move on to our decent Pokemon. And I almost want to put Sudowoodo here in the good category, because he is extremely good in a utilitarian role. I mean, when I get Sudowoodo in my opening hand, he's probably going to be the one I put in the active spot first. Because what he does is he can double draw. For one colorless energy, he can just draw you 2 cards at the end of the turn, and then on the next turn you get another card. So he's just a drawing machine. He is great. So he's really great in the early game. As the game progresses towards the later stage, and as your opponents have stronger and stronger attacks that can overpower his 100 HP, he becomes less and less useful. And with this deck, there is sometimes a problem of drawing out, and so you might not want to use him, later on. But early on, he is really nice. He only takes 1 energy to retreat. And, here's the kicker. Opponents don't really want to attack Sudowoodo unless they can knock him out. Because his flail ability, for only 1 energy, deals as much damage as he does have damage counters on himself. So, you don't really want to put a whole bunch of damage counters on Sudowoodo, because he's going to come and get ya. So that's just the only thing. He is borderline a really good Pokemon, but I thought to put him in the decent category because, when I play this game and he's there, he's not, when I get him in the latter parts of the game, or if I have extra Sudowoodos in my hand, he's just not worth it that often. So this deck does have a couple of lame Pokemon, and they really are kind of terrible. The first one is our friend Slugma. Slugma has the Yawn ability, which puts the opponent to sleep, which, could be an okay stall tactic, but, with sleep, they're constantly flipping coins to wake back up, so there's not a good chance of them staying asleep for very long. So that's not a great ability. And his Flare, oh my goodness, his Flare, for 30 damage, it costs 3 energy, 1 fire, and 2 colorless. That is way too much for 30 damage. That is just not a good deal. I would not use that. That is just... only in the worst and most dire of situations would you do that with Slugma. And I honestly think if you have to do that, you are in a really bad position in the game. And let's go right to the evolution with Magcargo. Magcargo in the Entei deck was the star. Like, the second star of the deck was Magcargo. But in this case, no. I mean, he's got a decent attack, 3 energy for a Heat Blast that takes out 60. That's pretty good. He has 130 HP, and his Bright Flame attack, check it out, takes out 180 damage. That is pretty powerful. But it comes with a caveat, and that is that you have to discard 2 energy in order for him to use after he uses it. So you're losing energy that way, 2 energy in fact, and he has no way of, and this deck doesn't really have ways of like putting lots of energy on Pokemon, so that's not good. And if he's in your active spot, he costs 3 to retreat. That's not good. And so Magcargo and Slugma, they are lame. They honestly are terrible Pokemon that whenever I see them in my hand when I have this deck, I'm groaning because I wish I'd gotten someone else. Okay, let's talk about some of the trainer cards we have in this deck. So trainer cards, of course, are really important in a deck. They kind of round out your deck. They let the strategies that you want to have happen. And in this deck, I think whoever designed this deck over, the good folks over at Pokemon, they did a really good job with the trainers. I have trainers broken up into 3 typical categories. It's the top, the very best. We have the middle, and then we have the bottom. And you know what? This deck has no bottom level trainers. I think they are all good. There's only one trainer that I'm not a huge fan of, and that when I play, I typically don't find that I use that often. It's usually just in the most dire of circumstances that I would use this one, and it's kind of a Hail Mary. So let's go ahead and talk about what the top trainers are. The top trainers, I have a list of them here. Let me read them off to you. I have in my top trainers Switch, Evolution Incense, Great Ball, Ordinary Rod, Sonia, Beatty, Hop, Dan, and Leon. Those are the top trainers in the deck. So that's every single trainer except for one. And I think I'll just talk about the one mid-level trainer, because all the other ones are useful. If you look at their cards, you'll immediately know why they are good cards. Professor's Research is the one that I am not a huge fan of, because this deck draws a lot of cards already. And yes, Professor's Research does help you draw cards as well, but you have to discard your hand. That's the game changer. Discarding your whole hand in order to draw those 7. That can be difficult, especially if you have, like, if you had Charizard in your hand and you were looking for, you know, Charmander or something like that, or Charmeleon, you wouldn't want to throw Charizard away, because then you'd have to try to find, like, use an ordinary rod to get Charizard back, and that would be a huge hassle. So it's not a card you want to use that often unless you're in just dire straits and you need to discard your hand. Or if you have no hand left, then using Professor's Research is great. But you know what? I often find that when I have Professor's Research in my hand, there are so many other drawing mechanics that you already have a large hand, and that you don't need to use it that much. So because there are chances to use it, it's in the medium category. It's definitely not the bottom, because bottom just means it's useless, it's no good. But Professor's Research is a very situational card, and so I find myself rather using other draw mechanics in this deck than Professor's Research. So that's why it gets the middle level. If there was a card that I thought was special in terms of the trainers, it would of course be Leon, because that's the one that really makes this deck kick, and we'll talk about that when we get to the strategy section. But Leon is basically a card that adds 30 more damage, and it works very well with a particular Pokemon that rhymes with Izzard. Is that right? That was a terrible joke. Okay, now we're on to wishes. What do I wish was going on with this deck? Well, first of all, I wish that Slugma and Magcargo were not in this deck. Okay? They dragged this deck down. I wish you could replace them with just other Pokemon. You know, in Relentless Flame, you have Ponyta and Rapidash. If those guys were in this deck, it would be amazing. But you know what? Honestly, I think they put Slugma and Magcargo in this deck to actually slow this deck down, because this deck is very powerful, and to balance the deck out a bit, they probably had to throw in some, like, bad Pokemon, and so they put these two in. So I see why they're here, because I guess they can't make a deck that just steamrolls everybody, but they just drag down this deck, that's for sure. Another wish I had for this deck is, you know, you have the ability to switch and retreat, but there's no ability in this deck to, like, grab Pokemon from their bench and put them into the active spot so that you can whack them and knock them out. You just don't have that ability in this deck. Having that ability is really, really powerful, like a Pokemon catcher. I mean, that catches people off guard. That can be game-changing. And sometimes you're just like, I need to get their Pokemon off their bench so that I can, you know, fight them. Or they have just somebody on their active position that is just too difficult to deal with at the moment. You want to be able to get rid of them. There is no way in this deck to pull Pokemon into the active spot, so that definitely is something I wish this deck had. If they had maybe one Pokemon catcher, that would be nice, just to have that ability. But, you know, when I play this deck, I know I have no ability to do that. So, that sucks, honestly. I wish I could. Now, this last point with wishes has nothing to do with the playability of this deck. It's just that this is called the Charizard theme deck, and I know they did that with the Sirfetch'd deck and stuff like that, or the Dreadnought deck, but I think they should have come up with a cool name. Like, Relentless Flame was a really awesome name for the other Charizard deck. And maybe it's called Relentless Flame and you don't know Charizard's in it, so maybe they wanted to, like, highlight the fact that Charizard's in it or highlight the Pokemon more. But I like the names of the theme decks that have, like, a cool name that goes with the theme. Rather than just slapping on the name of the Pokemon. You know, come up with a really cool name. Like Liquid Fire or something. That's not very good. But come up with a really cool name for this deck other than the Charizard deck. It's just not that cool sounding. And I want it to have a better name than it has. Is that too much to ask for? Okay, moving on to the strategies. What are the strategies of this deck? Well, the main strategy of the deck is just to get Charizard out as soon as you can. And there are so many cards that help you get Charizard out. Okay, let me list them. I actually made a list here. So, to get Charizard onto the field as quickly as possible, you have cards that draw like Hop, Dan, Professor's Research, Sonia, Evolution Incense, Great Ball. Those are all cards that can help you get Charizard. Now, they either help you draw cards to get to Charizard, or they grab like Charmander or Charmeleon out of your deck. So like if you have Charizard and you need Charmander, maybe use a Sonia if you have her as a trainer card in your hand, because that's going to grab Charmander. That's going to help you build Charizard pretty quickly. And I've seen Charizard come out in this deck very, very quickly, because there are so many instances in this deck where you can use cards to just draw and draw and draw till you get the main man out. And so I would say the number one strategy, and of course it makes sense being called the Charizard deck, to get Charizard out. Now obviously if you have Charizard out on your bench, that's going to be scary for your opponent, but you still have to use Charizard wisely. Okay, so number one, he has the battle sensibility where you can look at the cards on the top of your deck, the three of them, and then pick one, dump the other two. That's extremely powerful because you're getting more cards in your hand at the cost of throwing away a couple cards. We'll talk about that being a little bit of a weakness later on with this deck, but being able to see cards and get more cards in your hand is an awesome ability. Now, you're going to want to focus on the Leon trainer, because his second, or not his second ability, but his actual damage attack deals 100 base damage, but 50 more for every Leon that's in the discard pile. It's not every Leon that you play along with the attack, it's the one that's in the discard pile. So if you were using Battle Sense and you saw a Leon card and something else, and you needed something else really bad, I would have grabbed that something else and then thrown the Leon away, because that already ups Charizard's damage. But if you can play Leon and attack with Charizard, the Leon goes into the discard pile, adds 30 to the damage, and then adds 50 more because of the Charizard text. You're adding 80 damage to that attack, attacking for 180. That is a lot of damage and can knock out just about any Pokemon. So I wrote down here that Charizard, he deals 100 damage, but he can also deal 150 damage with one Leon in the discard, 180 damage if you use the Leon card for an attack, 200 damage if two Leon cards are in the discard pile already, or even 230 damage if you use a Leon when attacking while there's already another Leon in the discard pile. So you're going to want to see those Leon cards, you're going to want them in the discard pile, and you're going to want to use your discretion when playing Leon cards, because you can really deal tons and tons of damage. You're going to want to save them or strategically use them to take out the opponent's strongest guys. If for whatever reason you can't get Charizard out, maybe like you have two of them stuck in the prize pile, man, that would be terrible. You're going to want to use Yanmega. Yanmega is super powerful. His U-turn can be abused. I'm just saying. His U-turn ability to just attack for 50 and then switch out with someone else. What if you had two Yanmegas? That would be just nasty. It would be nasty because his free retreat cost can just be absolutely taken advantage of, and he can be such a strong Pokemon, dealing 50 a turn and eventually even 130. So if Charizard can't be your main fighter, Yanmega is not a bad choice as your secondary go-to Pokemon to deal damage. Very strong, and especially if you can find your opponent has weakness to grass energy or grass Pokemon, he is just going to absolutely wreck. Now, if you have Yanmega and Charizard out, that is a match that is just so scary. And I mentioned this before, but in case someone skipped that information, if you have Sudowoodo at the beginning of the game, I highly recommend putting him out into your active spot to start drawing cards. He is a great Pokemon to just draw 2 cards, 2 cards, 2 cards until your opponent gets annoyed enough to try to start taking him out. And if they cannot take Sudowoodo out right away, on the next turn, Sudowoodo can just, really hit hard because he can hit for as much damage as he has on him for only 1 energy. So if he has like 70 damage, his 1 colorless attack will deal 70 damage to the opposing Pokemon on that turn. That is a really nice ability. So while Sudowoodo might not be the greatest all the time, especially later on in the game, at the beginning of the game, I would definitely use him, and then I would before he has a chance to die, unless you really, really need him out there to be a punching bag. Retreat him and then put out another Pokemon like Charmeleon or Charizard or Yanmega to start taking out the opponent. You don't want to leave Sudowoodo in there too long. You don't want him drawing your entire deck out. So just be careful how long you have him up front. Okay, let's talk about strengths of this deck. This deck is very strong. I already told you the Pokemon in this deck are so good. You have Charizard, Yanmega, Sudowoodo, Lugia. You have these Pokemon that are really strong Pokemon. Hardly any bad Pokemon in this deck. So that's definitely a strength. The other strength is that you have the ability to draw through this deck very quickly because of cards like Sudowoodo, and a lot of the trainer cards are drawing mechanics. Charizard himself has a drawing mechanic along with, like I said, Sudowoodo. So you're drawing and drawing all the time. In fact, when I play against this deck and I'm watching my opponent, they almost always have way more cards than I do because they're just drawing and drawing and drawing. I feel like they have so many options that maybe they don't even know what to do with themselves. That's how many options this deck has. So this deck can draw, and that is a major strength of this deck. Now, if you're new to Pokemon, this is actually a very straightforward and easy deck to learn. It's dead simple. I mean, you need to get Charizard out, you need to get Yanmega out, you need to draw cards. That's like the whole thing. So if you are a newer player and you're just getting into Pokemon, this deck is going to be very simple to run. There's no complex strategies really. They are very straightforward strategies about card drawing and trying to use Leon to your biggest advantage, dealing tons of damage with Yanmega and Charizard. And that's all you have to know about this deck. It's uncomplicated and simple. So if you're looking for something that's not too technical, this is a great deck to use, and it is a beastly deck. Deals so much damage and can win you quite a few games. Alright, let's just quickly talk about weaknesses. This deck, I've mentioned it before, but the thing that I've seen time and time again, people draw out and they lose the game. In Pokemon, if you have to draw a card and you have no more cards to draw, you lose. And some people don't know that fact for some reason. I'm like watching them play and they draw and they lose. Don't do that. But you have a legitimate danger of drawing out, because if you're just drawing with Sudowoodo and you keep battle sensing and you keep using, your draw 3s and your Professor's Research and all of these things, your Dan cards, you're gonna draw out really quickly, and that is a real danger and it can lose you games. So don't draw out. Don't get overzealous drawing cards. If you have what you need, hold on to those draw cards. Maybe don't use battle sense. Just play with what you got, especially if you have the advantage already. Draw cards when you need to or when you can afford to. So just keep that in mind. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. And in this case, we're talking about drawing cards. Another weakness of this deck, of course, is its direct competition, the water Pokemon. If you're facing someone who has a lot of water in their deck, they're going to be dealing, 2 times damage to like your big guns like Charizard, Charmeleon, Charmander. They can get knocked out very, very quickly because some of those water Pokemon can be very, very strong early on. And so, I think as more people play this deck, you're going to see more and more water out there. And so it is quite a challenge to beat a water deck with this deck, just because of the nature of obviously this being mainly a fire deck. So just be careful when you see water. You're going to want to hit hard, hit fast, hit strong as quickly as you can. Be on your A game, but it is definitely a challenge and a weakness to face water, obviously being your natural foe. And finally, because this deck is so popular, I see it all the time. I think people know how to play against this deck. They know what cards are in this deck. People are very familiar with this deck, and oftentimes when you play Pokemon, something that's very helpful is if you can catch your opponents by surprise. And this deck, the opponent knows what you're doing. They probably know all the cards in this deck. I know when I'm playing this deck, I know exactly what I'm looking for, and I can kind of get a feel of what the other player is doing. So that can be a weakness, just because this deck can be very telegraphed, and since it's so common, you see it over and over, you know what's coming, so maybe you can game plan against it, or the opponent can game plan against you if you're playing this deck. So that's just something you need to be wary of. Just the popularity of this deck is a little bit of a weakness for it. Alright, so I talked a lot about the Charizard theme deck. It is a really good deck. I mean, I would definitely pick it up and play it. It's a very strong deck, and even if you are like, I don't want to play a deck that's like overpowered, because this deck can be kind of overpowered, it's worth picking up just so that you know the nuances of the deck. Because if you play the deck, you will understand the deck, and you will know how to defeat it, and the things that can frustrate you about this deck. So just be on the lookout for that. If I'm I'm definitely gonna give this deck a grade, and we might as well do it now. This deck is an A. Straight up an A. It is a strong deck. It's going to win you lots of games. Like I already mentioned, it's easy to use. And that's why you see it a lot. It's not just because Charizard, but it's a very simple deck to use. There's nothing complicated about it. You don't have to have like crazy different combinations. You're just trying to get Charizard out there to like blow everyone away. And so if you can use Charizard to do that, and you already know Charizard can do that, then you're well on your way to winning with this deck. It has great Pokemon in it, it's well thought out, you know exactly what you're supposed to do. Draw, 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 get Charizard, power him up, Battle Sense, and destroy. I mean, that's what you gotta do, that's what this deck does. It is a beast of a theme deck. Always a challenge to play. Like I said, it's weak to water, but even if you're a water player, don't get too cocky, because this deck can literally destroy you really quickly if you are not paying attention and you think you're, oh, just because I'm water I can beat this. That's not exactly the case. You'll still have a challenge in front of you. Well, thanks for watching this video. This is my in-depth review of the Charizard theme deck. If you use it, let me know what you think of the Charizard theme deck. And if you want to meet with me on Zoom one of these days, I'd love to do that. We could play a game of Pokemon. My handle on there is at BlackSheep217. That's on Pokemon, the trading card game site. And of course on Facebook, it's at Zoom Battle Gym. We meet a lot of times on Saturdays. I'll post events, give out little prizes. Come and play. I think we'll have a lot of fun. Thanks for watching this video. Have a great time playing Pokemon, and I will see you next time.